The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame. Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I am Reagan Kelly, and for this very special episode, I am joined by two co-hosts and a guest.
Laura Nash.
Shane Kelly, your brother.
And joining us from the BirdNote podcast, the illustrious Mark Bramhill. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Mark.
Always happy to join y'all on The Short Game.
Thank you. And we are, of course, because Mark is here, perhaps you could guess we are doing, or perhaps you even looked at your podcast app, we are doing another Bird Week.
Yeah, this is kind of like when people call you on the phone and it's like, hello, who is it? Yeah, I know you. I know my name showed up on your phone. You saw the episode title. It's Bird Week.
That's right. And if you are somehow new to The Short Game, first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you are new, maybe you don't know about Bird Week. This is a tradition that we are attempting to manufacture here on The Short Game.
Have successfully manufactured. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think at this point we can call this a success. Last year, around this same time, although not actually quite a full year ago, we did a Bird Week episode, and then the one before that was way back in, I think, 2016. So there's no set schedule for Bird Week. It's a floating holiday.
The third annual-ish Bird Week.
Ish, indeed. But yes, so Bird Week is a week where, rather than our typical format of picking a short but interesting video game, playing it and discussing it in a round table book club style format, we give you a sort of an assortment, a potpourri of games specifically featuring or about birds. And you'd think that would be a very specific niche, but interestingly, there's always a bunch of games about birds in any given... We're not sticking strictly to games that came out this year or anything, but actually a lot of them are. So there's a lot of interesting bird games to talk about.
Yes, it's a genre, I think, bird games. And as a genre, the bird game seems to overlap surprisingly well with the short game. Don't know why. Maybe it's the flighty nature of our fine feathered friends that translates so well into a brisk and brief experience.
We're not necessarily collecting together all of the very best games out there. That's really not the nature of Bird Week. They're all interesting games that there's something to say about.
Well, of course they're interesting. They're about birds.
Absolutely, very true. But sometimes we do really strike gold with Bird Week. Last year, for instance, we talked about A Short Hike, which went on to win the Seamus McNally Grand Prize at IGF and was a very well-regarded game. I don't know if we'll quite strike gold that same way this year, but we have an assortment of bird games to talk about. Before we get into them, I wanted to quickly shout out our patrons. This show is Patreon supported. So, of course, if you like the show, you can always find us on Patreon at the patreon.com/theshortgame, and you can join listeners such as Michael Smith, Tyler Plummer, or Abigail, no last name given. Thank you, Abigail, for your support. And all of our listeners are invited to our Discord, which is where we talk mostly about birds and share bird puns. So...
I think I'm still sharing Goose Game memes. We have not archived that channel just for me to randomly post memes of Goose holding toilet paper.
Goose, yeah.
Yeah. She's constantly honking off in that channel.
Yeah, I like to keep that channel around just in case I need to go back and reference all the good Goose memes. So thank you to all of you who shared them with us there. So without any further ado, the very first bird game that we wanted to talk about, I think Laura and I both played this one a little bit, and it's one of the flashier looking games that I played for this year's Bird Week, and that's Songbird Symphony, which is a game on the Nintendo Switch, the PlayStation 4, and on Steam, Mac and Windows.
Yeah, this has some excellent pixel art.
Yeah, that's really what drew me into this one. It's got incredible looking pixel art. And honestly, mostly that's down to the character designs. The main character is this, so it's a platforming game. It's a, pretty straightforward, basic platforming
Deathless
game.
platformer. Mm-hmm.
Right, that's true. Yeah, deathless and very clearly kind of intended to be like a mellow, smooth experience. You're playing as a bird named Burb, and he is a round boy, kind of a sparrow, I guess.
Like a sparrow crossed with a chicken body.
Yeah, he's just a real chunky little round, fluffy, squishy guy, and
a chunk, as it were.
And the number one thing that I think makes this game stand out is the incredible character design. Burb himself is constantly moving. Like his idle animation, for example, is a sort of if you like leave him standing alone for a moment, his idle animation is a little birdie dance that begins with a sort of a bob and weave and then goes through 5 or 6 iterations in a sort of a random order. It's amazing looking. This is where our limitations as a medium, as a podcast, really just hamper me, but it has the most like incredibly charming squash and stretchy, gooey body bird animations that you could you really want to hug this tiny little bird. He's adorable.
For example, the walk animation isn't a normal, like, just a little bit of a stroll. Like, the bird just kind of walks as if his arms and legs are made of jello. There's just so much extraneous movement that is where a ton of the charm of the game comes from.
Yeah, I didn't actually get very far with this one, though, unfortunately, just because I thought I was going to love it based on the art. And the music is also pretty solid. Like it's got a nice, cute little soundtrack. But it didn't do much for me. It's a platformer, like a challenge light platformer with the twist being sort of that the bosses or combat, so to speak, is all like little mini rhythm games. So it's like very not challenge focused. And what that leaves you with, I mean, maybe this is my preconceptions showing through, but like when you say that there's a combat-free platformer, what that usually means is a collect-a-thon. Like you've got to go and collect the 8 orbs in the zone.
It's move through the level and find the thing so that you can do the rhythm game.
Right. Yeah, and I kind of hate this type of level design. Songbird Symphony has what I have sometimes heard. Didn't coin this term. I think somebody on Retronauts said it and I stole it, but I don't remember. It's sort of airplane hangar level design, which is to say that basically every level is just sort of like this massive rectangle with a bunch of platforms in it that are, connected in one way or another. And your job is to kind of go through the whole thing and try to find all of the dots. And you want to collect all of those dots before you can proceed.
I'm only okay with that in Greece, and that's because Greece was really pretty.
It mostly reminds me of things like Earthworm Jim. And, some people love those games, Earthworm Jim and other games like them, but like I don't like that style. Like that style of platforming, like I want to be presented with challenges that are difficult to execute, but not impossible. And I don't want to have to do like, I don't know. I still want to have to do this. Like, I didn't really enjoy this very much.
Your comparison to Greece is a good touch point there, because for that style of game, I actually have some games in that mode that I do like. And it's usually the art and theming that pulls me along. Like, it also has to be something where I don't have to really get to the end of the level and then realize I missed the one golden orb at the start and replay the whole thing. That's kind of the killer.
This one has a bit of that problem. And I think for me, it was, I really like a rhythm game, but this one's more like a bop it than like a rhythm game. It's too easy in some ways. Like you don't have to have rhythm. You have to perform the commands. But I think it's aimed at an all ages audience. So with the deathless combo and the rhythm game being so lax, like it felt like there were no guardrails and no challenges to fit. And I'm actually okay with that. It just kind of the game and the theme and the look and how easy it was, like all of those things seemed a little bit mismatched for me.
Yeah, mismatch is sort of what I'm thinking too, because like if I'm in a game to experience its art and music and not have like a challenging platforming experience, That's cool, but I want to keep forward momentum then, because I'm kind of thriving on like new visuals and forward
you're
progress.
thriving on tone, and you can throw in bird puns, but like at the right time. Like it just seemed like the timing of things wasn't where I wanted them to be.
So that said, I think this might be a great game to play with a kid. It's very kid friendly. It's very cute. I think it would be a very good sort of, or potentially a good first platformer for somebody, or not necessarily even first, but like if you've got somebody who's like challenged by that sort of thing, but who will be charmed by this aesthetic, it might really work for somebody like that. But unfortunately, this didn't really do much for me. I really did love the art, though. I really, really love the art. So I think the next thing we were going to talk about was, Laura, you have a bit of a special connection in a sense to our next game, Toki Tori.
I do.
Wait, before we do that?
But before we do any transition, bird fact TM time. Can we trademark that?
Bird fact. So the first bird fact I prepared for everyone has to do with frame rates and birds. So I thought it would be particularly appropriate for a game podcast.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so with a movie, then that's at 24 frames per second, and that's just fast enough to be able for humans to create that illusion of a moving picture. But if you were to show that to a bird, let's say a pigeon, they might be excited about the popcorn at the movies, but they are probably not going to be very interested in that movie because they need to see something at a significantly higher frame rate for it to create that illusion. It's somewhere like over 100 frames per second or so to be able to successfully pass that perception threshold for a bird, which I think is really cool that to them,
So that's why they spend so much on graphics cards.
I just love the idea that birds are watching movies and being like, oh, it's just like a really shitty flip book.
Yeah, exactly. It's something where that tense car chase or whatever is going to seem like stop motion that's really badly done.
Birds are really going to complain about your frame rates on your games.
They need really good performance to be interested in anyone's video games. So
I think this will inform all future bird game picks.
If it's not at pushing 100 frames per second, it can't be in Bird Week.
Well, Laura, how are the frame rates on Toki Tori?
Not up to bird standards, but just fine for everyone else. So Toki Tori is a game that we recently remastered for Game Club and put on iOS. So I will give that. I do work for Game Club, so take that with a grain of salt. We didn't create the original, though. That's by Two Tribes, these Dutch developers. And they started out actually putting this out on Game Boy Color in 2001. Then they put it on, I think, Windows Phone, and then the Wii, and then iOS. Like, they just kept putting it on platforms right when platforms came out. So it's been on anything you can play on. If you want to play Toki Tori, and I think you should, it's really fun. You can pick your devices, and if you're a Game Club subscriber, you can play it on iOS and Android soon. Have to say that. But if you're like, Laura, you haven't told me what this game is. It's a puzzle platformer where you play this little bird. The bird is a little yellow thing. It looks like it should be bald, but it's not. It's like a little yellow
a little egg-shaped bird.
And the idea is that you are going around and rescuing your unhatched siblings on each level. So if you're an old school short game listener, it's got some like swapper qualities. It's got like a lot of that like puzzle platformer bits because you start off and all you can do is like walk and fall and climb ladders. And rewind time if you get stuck.
Like birds can.
Yeah. Like you can rewind time. All birds have this power. That is another bird fact.
Mm-hmm.
But you can get a portal gun, you can get a freeze ray, you can get like slime will start falling from the ceiling. All kinds of different tools unlock as you play the game. So it gets really elaborate and quite difficult as you keep playing. I told Greg Reagan before I started this that I've played the first 15 levels of Toki Tori about 30 times and the rest of it once because I was testing the beginning of the game. But it's really quite challenging, and there's a lot to explore. If you decide, there's also a sequel, Toki Tori 2, where you get a little bit more powers, and I think you can whistle and hop. So that adds just another layer onto the puzzle platformer. But it's got these really 4 distinct worlds. And so once you master one of your tools, when you go to a new place, all the tools act slightly differently. Which I think is the mark of a good puzzle platformer. You learn the mechanic, but when you go to a different environment, it acts totally different.
Those are really, like, it's a famous, good series of puzzle platformers, and it's good to see them return to iOS. I think I'll probably pick up I actually downloaded the Toki Tori 2 Plus for the Switch recently, because I think it was on sale. I don't know if there was any synchronicity with the Game Club release there, but it just happened to be on sale around the same time. So I picked up that version, and I've only played a little bit of it because I was playing other Bird games. But I really, really like
and
this.
you knew
series.
I had this one covered.
Yeah, they're just terrific. So if you are looking for
we made so many excellent puns.
Oh, I bet.
All over this thing.
Yeah, but they're great, like puzzle platformers, just really, really solid. So now that the hallmark of this series has been that, like, it's been on everything. So it's still on everything. If you have a device that you want to play a game on, probably you can play a Toki Tori on it. But
they're very meticulous about their ports, so you can trust that if it's on something, it's a good port.
Yeah. So I'm excited to try the iOS version now that I know that that's available again after probably a long time. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
All right, before our next game, I've got a fact about pelicans. So brown pelicans, if you've ever seen how they fish, you know that they kind of circle above the water and then dive headfirst and go underwater to catch a fish. And they can be diving from as high as 60 feet. And so they need a way to not, like, be injured or hurt by smashing into the water at that speed. And they do a few kind of cool things to protect themselves. The first is that they have air sacs beneath the skin on their breasts, which act kind of like cushions or like airbags in a way. And while diving, a pelican is going to rotate its body just a little bit to the left. And this helps them avoid injury to the esophagus or the trachea, which are on the right side of the bird's neck. And they also make sure that they're diving at the right angle, around between 60 and 90 degrees, which reduces aiming errors, which can be caused by refraction from the water's surface. And that last part is something that they learn to do because the older pelicans are much better marksmen than younger birds. So some cool things about pelican diving. Although this next game is not about brown pelicans, but about Australian pelicans, and that is Storm Boy.
Yes, Mark, I'm glad you played this because I was, obviously I was looking through the Switch eShop and other stores for potential bird games. And this isn't one that shows up if you necessarily just do a search for bird, but it's an unusual game. I'm not even sure I really understood exactly what it was, but I saw that it featured a pelican. And so I said, hey, does anybody want to check this out? Mark, what is Storm Boy?
Yeah, so you shared the game in the Discord, and I immediately was just from seeing the pictures and the description, it was like, this sounds so up my alley, and really wanted to check it out. It's basically like a adaptation from a children's story, I believe of the same name, about this Australian boy and his pelican friend, Mr. Percival, which is extremely cute, and it's a really cute story. The visual style of it I found really charming, and seeing the sort of screenshots of that, it seemed like, oh, this is definitely my kind of game. And then I went to go play it and found that I was pretty disappointed by the actual implementation of it. it's very much a game where your controls quite literally are on the joystick, basically move forward in the story by holding to the right, or go back in the story by holding to the left.
Oh no, it's just like a movie.
Yeah, it's something where I think it honestly would have been better as like a little animated short film, and I think then it would have been extremely charming. But as a game, I found that like there was very little interaction. There are a number of things that they call daydreams, where you would go into like a little scene or something where you can interact with stuff, where you are feeding the pelican friends that he has made and tossing a fish to them.
Often my daydreams are about feeding my pelican friends. So yes, sensible.
Another one is you're digging up some clams on the beach, which felt like the annoying part of Animal Crossing, but not as well implemented.
My favorite flavor of clam.
Yeah, exactly. But even in those where it is more interactive, the controls and all that are actually extremely difficult to use and cumbersome. And so even some of the ways that it could be fun wind up feeling really frustrating. There were two of the daydreams that I thought were really fun. One where you go swimming underwater, and that was actually pretty nice. And another where you play fetch with your pelican, Mr. Percival. And it's hard not to be like, okay, this is pretty great. I've thrown a ball and a pelican's getting it and bring it back for me. That's fun. But I thought the story of the game was well done. The visuals and all of that were nice. Some of the sound design, there are moments where kind of the text that's shown for the story references raucous bird sounds or a specific bird calling, and there are no bird noises in the game. And
no,
that just is something where like you can't tease me with that and not put at least a little bit of bird sound in there. There's lots of other nice sound design, but
the one thing that really made me want to play this game was a particular screenshot from the eShop page in which the boy is giving the pelican a hug on a beach in front of a sunset. And it is honestly like a really beautiful picture. And so I wanted to ask you about that. Does the pelican give good hugs?
So that is one of those things where you don't have control over your character, really. It's just basically a cutscene. But I will say, extremely adorable. Things like that really do take it from being something where the moments of frustration, it's like, all right, I got to see a really cute pelican get a hug. That's pretty good. But overall, I was a little let down by it. The whole game takes about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how much time you spend in those daydreams. It really is just like going through a children's book, which, I think is staying true to the source material, which I think is smart. But I definitely wish that the gameplay and the ways that all of that worked were a little more, felt better integrated into the storytelling of the experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's a place sometimes for games that are essentially like a minimally interactive, children's book or, short film or whatever it might be that just presents a story in a minimally interactive way. But, having like, I think at the very least, having good sound effects is sort of table stakes, and having like, at least some kind of interaction that meets up with what you're seeing in a way that feels satisfying is also pretty important. So that's a bit of a disappointment. It does look beautiful though, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, the visuals of it, I was just really charmed by, and that was enough to keep me like, all right, I'm definitely going to keep playing this and enjoy like the moments where I did enjoy it, like playing fetch with the pelican. Then the visual style is really what makes something like that work. I just wish that all of it was at that same level. So to close out, I've got another bird fact to share. People, of course, can be left or right-handed, but it turns out that at least some birds can also have a dominant hand. Parrots are one example of this, where their eyes are on the sides of their head. So if it wants to look at something like a piece of fruit or whatever that it's holding, it has to cock its head to one side to be able to do that. And if it looks with its left eye, it's going to use its left foot. If it's right eye, right foot. And this is determined by what hand is dominant in the bird. And that particular foot is going to be used for all kinds of complex tasks that the bird does. Sulfur-crested cockatoos, almost all left-handed, or left-footed, I guess.
Sinister.
But yeah, pretty cool that is a thing that carries over into birds as well.
Yeah, that's weird. That hadn't even occurred to me.
Probably because they don't have hands.
Very true. Laura, I think you are going to introduce us to a short game in the truest sense of the word.
Yes, featuring a parrot. So thank you, Mark, for doing the extra mile to find a parrot-related fact. So in true short game procrastination style, I, about 2 hours ago, loaded up the interactive fiction database and searched for the word bird and found they have a tag called bird protagonist.
Oh.
And I clicked on that tag. There are three games tagged with bird protagonist. And lo and behold,
God bless the IFDB.
It is so good.
So good. And one of those three games is by Emily Short. So I looked and it was like 5 to 30 minutes. Oddly, the description didn't seem to mention birds at all, but I figured with that time and the tag bird protagonist, how could I go wrong?
Nobody's just going to put the tag bird protagonist onto a game by accident.
No. And
I mean, now
figured,
someone might.
Now someone's just going to go haywire. Please don't. So Glass by Emily Short is about the end of Cinderella.
Oh.
So you are observing a conversation between the prince and his mom, the queen. And when you ask for help, it says you can say a word and change the conversation or think. And it becomes very clear that you are a parrot yelling words. You're a parrot in a cage. And all you can do to influence the course of events is yell stuff at different times. If they're in different moods, yelling different words. Like you can yell love, and then the prince will get kind of misty-eyed. But if you yell love in the middle of another conversation, he'll look pissed. And so each playthrough is maybe 10 turns max, really short.
Classic Emily Short.
Yeah, many endings. The idea is that you just keep playing and restarting. I think she's saying stuff about like trying to put some subversiveness in. It's about fairy tales. It's about kind of repetitiveness. But she's clearly just playing with like how little can a person do. In this case, a parrot. So, and you don't even see yourself, but people will like call you a bad bird if you start yelling the word ball over and over again because you don't know what else to do. They'll just be like, this bird doesn't know how to behave. And they'll yell at you, which isn't nice. You shouldn't yell at parrots. But it's a little charming gem. It's very short. The really fun thing about this game is because it assumes you already know about Cinderella, it doesn't give you a lot of instructions, and it assumes you're going to come up with words that make sense. And it's also fun because the parrot repeats things. So when you say the word ball, it'll actually repeat a line that the queen said earlier. Like it's very clever in that like repeating dialogue, changing the story. So super short and very, very recommended.
Awesome. That sounds really, really neat. I love going and browsing through the IFDB and just sort of finding weird, interesting stuff. There's no really other place on the internet where you can see like a database of such a massive database of games that you can search in these like wild, like incredibly tagged and well organized way, and then literally just click into almost any of them and play them almost instantly. Like that's one of the amazing things about the IFDB is that like that stuff is almost all free and available and playable in a browser right there, ready to go. So
and heavily reviewed.
Absolutely.
Like this is by a popular author, but it's definitely way down on the like notability list. Still had 92 reviews
Wow.
or 92 ratings and like 4 reviews, including one that was really in depth. So even for like minor works, there's plenty, which is great.
And this one goes back to 2006, which shows you how long it's been that the IF community has really been experimenting with modes of interaction in these parser games. Probably you could give some examples that go farther back than this, but this one in particular really reminds me of that game we played, Toby's Nose.
Oh, I can see that.
Where
Yeah.
you're also an animal, and through being an animal interacting with a classic story, in that case Sherlock Holmes, you have like a limited set of keywords, things that you can do to influence the story and move the well, that one had some puzzle elements to it as well.
Yeah, this one's super simple, but it's got that same like limited set, playing on a fairy tale, something you're supposed to know very well. It's just like for a 5-minute game, it's got a lot of replayability, which is great.
That's really cool. Mark?
All right. Another bird fact. I want to tell you about a birds called shrikes. There's a number of different kinds of them. They are tiny. They look really cute, kind of cool. They've got
These are the tiny killers, right?
These are the tiny killers. The northern
the
shrike
butcher
is-
bird. I've heard of these.
These birds are cute, but very deadly. They are murderous little beasts. And something really cool about them is they will lure in other small birds with their song by including phrases that resemble and kind of mimic these prey species, chickadees and sparrows, and be able to imitate their calls, lure another bird in thinking it's another chickadee, and then they swoop in for the kill. And that is terrifying and awesome.
That's very cool, and also very appropriate to the next couple of games I was going to talk about, which I'm kind of grouping together. So not to get too ahead of myself, but I was going to mention that all 4 of the games I played this week are pixel art, sort of budget-priced indie Switch games. And most of them are also out on other platforms, but sort of unifying theme for me this week was like I played a bunch of bird games on Switch. And they're very varied in my responses to them. So obviously, like I mentioned with Songbird Symphony, I really liked the art, but I didn't so much get into the gameplay. The next 2 I'm going to kind of call out one after another, because the first one, Blazing Beaks, was something that I got off the Switch eShop thinking like, oh, this actually looks like a pretty quality game. And it is. It's also just like, I don't know what I was thinking. I just downloaded it and immediately was like, it's a quality game in a style that I don't end up actually liking. Every time I play one of these, I don't end up actually really enjoying it very much. With a couple of minor exceptions. Blazing Beaks is a top-down twin-stick shooter roguelite. So a popular style of games these days. So if you think about things like Enter the Gungeon would be probably the number 1 game for me in this style, but even things like what's that extremely popular one, the name of which I'm forgetting? Isaac, Binding of Isaac.
Binding of Isaac.
Mm-hmm. But this one, all of the characters are birds. So your sort of main character is a duck, but there's lots of other types of birds as well. You can be a chicken or, other birds. And I think also a platypus, some other beak-bearing creatures. And you have a gun, and your job is to go through various levels. It's a top-down perspective. Each screen is sort of self-contained with a bunch of enemies. Gameplay-wise, this feels and even looks basically like a clone of Nuclear Throne. So I don't know if any of you guys have played Nuclear Throne. I played it back when it was pretty new. It was a Vlambeer game. We've talked about Vlambeer on the show before. Vlambeer did Super Crate Box and Luftrausers and many popular games. This game, they did I think pretty well regarded top-down twin-stick shooter roguelike called Nuclear Throne, although it has mostly been overshadowed by other games in the genre. I think this is one of those genres where, like, if you like these top-down twin-stick roguelikes, You like them, and you probably have the one that you've played a zillion and one times, and then maybe you've tried some of the others, but you've got like very specific, particular reasons that your game is your game, right? So I think for a lot of people, the your game in that sentence is going to be like Isaac or Enter the Gungeon. Those are both super popular, and for one reason or another, Nuclear Throne was sort of overshadowed in that genre, even though I think it was pretty well regarded critically. But I did play it, and booting this up, it was like, I'm sure there are subtleties that, as somebody who's not really super, super into this genre, doesn't see, but to me, it just looked and felt like an absolute straight up clone of Nuclear Throne with birds instead of mutants. That's not to say it's not well made. It's an extremely well made one of these, from what I could tell. So if this is a style of game that you enjoy, first of all, like this is something you can get for, I think it was like, when I got it was on sale on the Switch eShop, and it was like $1 or something. So that was nice. It seems to go on sale quite a bit. And, that price was really masking the fact that it is a quality, well-made game. So if this is a style of game that you are into, I would definitely check out Blazing Beaks. But I just got into it and immediately was like, oh, right, I kind of hated Nuclear Throne, and I think I don't like this much either. So, joke's on me. I don't know why I decided to play this, knowing full well that this is the kind of game that I don't usually find myself getting that into. But there it is, and it is a quality one of these.
Also, birds cooler than mutants, so you should get this game.
I'll give it that, and also the sort of subtle irony of a duck wielding a shotgun is or not irony, perhaps just reversal, whatever that is. I like that idea. So yeah, if you like that, check it out. It's actually really well done, and the art style is decent. And I would recommend it if this is the sort of game that you like. Oddly enough, the other game was one that I thought I wasn't going to like because the next game I wanted to talk about briefly is Duck Souls. Terrible title. But it's not at all like Dark Souls is the first thing that I would say.
Wait. Seriously?
Right. It's not anything like Dark Souls at all. Except I think what they were trying to evoke with that title, which frankly I think is doing the game a disservice, although maybe it was good for marketing reasons, I don't know. But Duck Souls, or in the case of its console port, it's referred to as Duck Souls Plus. So there was a PC version that's Duck Souls. The console version is Duck Souls Plus. I'm not really sure what changed.
It got a plus.
Yeah, it is. It's more than Duck Souls. This one actually I really, really liked a lot and didn't expect to. First of all, what I think they're trying to evoke with Duck Souls, the title, is that it is a sort of quote-unquote masocore platformer. It's very difficult. Or rather, it pretends to be. This is what's sort of interesting about it. Many games in this sort of like, let me start by describing the game, and maybe I'll be a little clearer. It's a platformer with very bright, colorful graphics. You play as a tiny duck who has to collect one egg in every stage. Each stage fits entirely on one screen, so it's very self-contained. You can see all of the platforming challenges. You can see the egg from the very start of the level, and your job is to get from point A to point B in each of 100 levels to collect the egg at the end of the level. But in between you and the egg are lots of different things, mostly spikes and rotating knives and blades and lasers and other hazards. So it's one of those, right? If you've played things like Super Meat Boy is the touch point for this style of platforming, right? It's extremely aggressive, no life bar, one touch death, die fast, start over fast, try things until you get it right style of play. So I think when they say Duck Souls in the title, they were trying to evoke the fact that it's difficult. And when the very first version of this game came out, maybe Dark Souls was more in the consciousness. And I don't think it's a really good title. I think it does the game a disservice because it's actually extremely chill and pleasant for one of these. That's the thing that really struck me about this, is that it's a game that does the masocore platforming thing while doing everything it possibly can to make you feel chill about it. It has an incredibly nice soundtrack. I don't have the person who did the soundtrack in front of me. I should have looked it up in advance of this, because actually one of our patrons, when I mentioned Duck Souls, was immediately like, oh yeah, that one of my favorite game composers did the soundtrack for Duck Souls. Somebody Google it, or I'll try and Google it here I'll mention them in a second. But anyway, the soundtrack is lovely. It's really, really nice. And it's a chill, vibey soundtrack.
By Johan Turpin.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for Googling for me. I appreciate that. See, my problem here is that I can't Google while speaking on the podcast because my keyboard is very loud. Really lovely soundtrack. The art style is also really nice too. I couldn't find any reference to the development process on this. At first I thought, surely this is one of those games that began as a Pico 8 prototype, because it has the Pico 8 color palette, which you kind of know it if you see it. It's this sort of like very bright, very cheerful colors that and something about the pixel art style and color palette that they were using reminded me very much of things like the early Celeste demo that was made in Pico 8 or Pico 8, however you pronounce it. If you don't know Pico 8, though, just to kind of explain what I'm talking about, it's a pixel art style that's like small sprites, big pixels, low detail, and very bright colors. Not quite neon, but like bright and cheerful. A little bit day glow, a little bit, just an overall cheerful vibe. And then the last thing I'll mention about it is that it has that difficulty that I mentioned, but it has 2 difficulty modes, and it's very smart about it. First of all, there's no normal mode on this. It has casual mode and hard, which I think is interesting because there's no normal. And I played it mostly on casual, but the main difference is that are there checkpoints in the middle of a level? So, a level might be made up of, say, 3 or 4 kind of core platforming challenges. Do you have to make it over all of them to get to the egg, or do you have a checkpoint in the middle? That's the only real difference that I could discern between the hard and casual modes. I played it on casual, and I felt like it was a perfectly good experience that way. Although one of the other nice things about it, you can switch back and forth at any time. So if you are playing on hard and you want to switch over to casual, all of your unlocks count, and vice versa. If you've been playing on casual and you want to switch over to hard, you are continuing where you left off. So overall, really recommend this game. Its title doesn't do it any favors, and honestly, its key art, it's like advertising art that you see in the shop and on its logo and everything, also doesn't do it a lot of favors because I just don't think it's very attractive. But the game itself it's really beautiful once you get into the levels. The music is lovely, the pixel art is great, and it manages to make the Masocore platforming genre vibey, which is unexpected. So I would recommend this game, absolutely. And it's on everything. It's on Switch, PC, PS4, Xbox One, and PS Vita. If you happen to be one of the hardcore Vita Nation survivors, hang in there, PS Vita fans. So I would 100% recommend checking out Duck Souls. It seems like it goes on sale pretty frequently, even its full price. I think it's like $5. So 100 nice little levels and a really good soundtrack. Check it out.
All right. Time for another bird fact. I'll be honest, this one does not have anything to do with the following game, but I think it's cool. About another bird that is known for its mimicry, the mockingbird, the northern mockingbird, which from its name, you might think is named for being found in the northern states. But it actually was not in northeastern states until the 20th century. They expanded their range into Ohio and the upper Midwest. Originally, these birds are southerners, but they are named this because they are northern relative to other mockingbirds that are found in Central and South America, the tropical mockingbird, which, I don't know, I just thought it was pretty cool to learn that the mockingbird is a southerner.
That's right, y'all.
I mean, Harper Lee and you.
So the next game on our list, I hesitate to use the word game because as I've said many, many times on this show, I'm big tent about what constitutes a game. Anything that you play with, anything that you play, and play is also a expansive term, is a game.
I actually once walked Reagan out somewhere where we saw a big tent, and he pointed and he said, "That's a game."
That's a game. I saw it.
Yes, fact.
It's a game. And this is a museum. And I pointed at it and said, that's a game. The Bird Museum. Mark, would you explain the Bird Museum, please?
Yeah, it is a fun, free game that's available on itch, which I recommend using their app to download it if you are on a Mac. I could not get it to work otherwise. But once I had it up and running, you go in and it is this little virtual museum that is randomly filled each time you play it with a large selection of bird art that people submitted to the developer online, ranging from people's just random sketches of a bird that are not super high quality to like incredible drawings and sculptures that people rendered that they submitted. And it is pretty fun. I really enjoyed looking around. I got a couple of duplicates in there, but it did seem like there was probably still a large amount of art that it was drawing from, and you could play it, reload it a few times and see more stuff. But going around, I found myself taking a whole bunch of screenshots, thinking like, oh, this is so fun. Like, look at this one. That's ridiculous. And it really did remind me of like going to an art museum where I would take a photo of like my favorite pieces or whatever, just to be able to look at them later. And yeah, there was some funny things, but also just some like really nicely done art that I was kind of surprised by.
Yeah, I played through this as well, and I really liked it. What I think is kind of most important about this is that it is something where you get a different selection of bird art every time you quote unquote visit the museum, and that's neat. I only visited twice, but I agree. I sort of had fun both times. In these times, as we have had to say pretty often lately, in these interesting times, I'm not going out to any art museums, but this was a kind of a fun little experience to like simulate one. And I was surprised at how much like a museum visit it felt. I mean, I don't think that, the Guggenheim or whatever should be immediately like digitizing their collection and presenting it online in a virtual. Actually, what am I saying? They should absolutely do that. That would be amazing. I would love to have a virtual Guggenheim to walk through or whatever. But like, yes, that is great. But like the idea that like taking this like random art from Twitter and presenting it in a museum style locale kind of elevated what would be like weird sketches from Twitter into art that I took more time to appreciate it than I would have scrolling through a Twitter feed. And so I really dug that about it. And I think this is a really good idea. I hope that more people do this. It's really clever.
Yeah. And I definitely had that same sort of feeling of like, I probably would not think much of some of these drawings, seeing them on Twitter or wherever else. But something about it does really elevate it, or at least makes your mind think about it a little bit more. It really does evoke that museum feeling. Also, just the way that the building is done feels really, really has that eyewitness intro vibe. If any of y'all saw any of those videos.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
That one, yeah.
I can see that. Yeah, for me, it reminded me, this is kind of weird, but it reminded me of like The Witness or other like games where you're like on an, like Myst a little bit. Like it just sort of like you're on this like mysterious island that's like empty except for this weird bird museum of internet drawings. I really... Actually, one of the things that I thought was also particularly really neat about it was that it's not all just 2D art. There's also sculptures, and the sculptures, of course, are just like 3D renders. Some of those were really good too. So like, there's like one of my favorite screenshots I took here is somebody named Madison Sherrick did at Menelos on Twitter did a really beautiful sculpt of a bird doing a dance, wearing a top hat, and holding a cane, doing some sort of old vaudevillian type of dance or something. Just a really good piece of art. And it's, of course, next to like an incredibly weird looking bird helicopter and a sphere with a beak that looks angry, and the head of that one bird shaped guy from My Hero Academia. Like, it's a real interesting assortment. And I just thought it was really fun to sort of walk through and look at all the birds. I don't know. There's nothing else to do about this other than look at birds, but that's what it is.
I think my favorite piece was one called Pink-Necked Green Pigeon, in parentheses, Anxious, by Jaihui at Ulcer Update on Twitter.
I love Twitter.
Which is something where, I don't know, it's something where it's like, yeah, that is really cool art. And I really feel that where, I don't know, I just really liked that one. There were a number of others I took screenshots of. I loved that vaudevillian sculpture. I got that one as well. Another good one was Striped by Marijke McDonald at, I'm trying to read this with the colors all separated in the pink.
Yeah, it did this weird chromatic aberration kind of thing on the graphics, which I'm not sure what they were going for with that, but it does, I don't know, adds a little bit of something. Made the text hard to read.
At Gekonidae? I don't know.
It's, is what it is. It's Twitter. Go visit the museum. Yep. You'll see it for yourself.
So Reagan just threw some shade on the Guggenheim, which has a really good online collection if you want to look at pictures of stuff. But in this weird time we're in, I've looked at virtual museum tours, and I want to give a shout out to Thyssen-Bornemisza Museo Nacional. Just search like Spanish virtual tour museum, it'll come up. They've got insane and Google Street View is one thing, but to like actually put like full detailed walkthroughs where you can zoom in on everything in the exhibit. And they also all work with VR. They also made audio guides for several of these. So you can walk up in VR or on your desktop, double click, zoom in on something, and then listen to the audio as if you're in the museum. But there's some cool ones. There's like a Balenciaga and Spanish painting one where they have clothes next to paintings. There's impressionists and then photography being done at the same time next to each other. So like it's museum virtual COVID technology has come a long way.
I'm glad to hear it. And hopefully we'll all be able to walk through museums other than just the Bird Museum. Mark, do you have a final bird fact for? Oh no, not final. We've got two more, hopefully, bird facts before you have to start making them up.
No, he's been making all of these up.
Oh, yeah. For all some of you know, then that could be true.
I was beginning to suspect, yeah.
Birds aren't real.
So this one I learned pretty recently. So herons and spoonbills and some other wading birds, they have the problem of raccoons often invading their nesting colonies and eating the eggs that are in their nests. And, they've got to find some kind of home security. They're not going with something like Simply Safe or whatever. Instead, what they have been doing is building their nests on islands around, because they're wading birds, they're already in flooded, watery areas, but on tiny little islands where alligators are in the surrounding waters, because that is a very likely deterrent for a raccoon.
Ooh.
There is the downside of occasionally a chick will fall from the nest and be eaten up by an alligator, but overall they're more likely to nest on these islands in alligator waters than not, which I don't know. I think that's funny of like literally going with the alligator moat as home defense.
That is awesome. And speaking of the nest, Shane played a game that I've been eager to hear a little bit about called Fledgling Heroes, right, Shane?
Well, there's an easy transition here because we are discussing birds in collaboration with large lizards, which feature heavily in the game Fledgling Heroes. really, to talk about Fledgling Heroes, I have to start by going back to, I want to say 2013. I think I looked this up earlier. 2013, a dude named Dong made the most addicting game of all time, and it changed the app marketplace forever. That game, of course, was the original Tap to Flap, Flappy Bird.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any memories of Flappy Bird?
I remember arguing with you about it on this podcast. I need to go back into our archive. I think it was in the first couple of weeks of the show. And you were, I remember I was like staunchly defending, saying like Flappy Bird is good game design because it is compelling. And you were like, no, it's crap. And I was very angry.
Is that true? I would have to go back and revise. Well, I think both of us were correct. One, Flappy Bird was inherently compelling game design, and B, yes, one and B, Flappy Bird is crap. So
one A1, A with a dagger.
Yes. So the core of Fledgling Heroes is exactly Flappy Bird. It is the tap to flap game. But if you were to take that core concept and build it out into a much, much, much more full-featured and engaging experience, that would be what you'd pretty much wind up with here. Fledgling Heroes, well, first let's start with the art style of Fledgling Heroes, which is really, really beautiful. It's got this not quite cartoony, not quite realistic, very artistic art style. Like the backgrounds and the scenery are all these beautiful line art, kind of looks like something drawn by a good cartoonist leaning heavily on Adobe Illustrator, if that makes sense to you. And it is a game in which you have this collection of birds, each of whom have a slightly different control style. Getting through lots, and I mean lots, of levels where you are facing off against lizards, which are pirate lizards. It's a really charmingly animated game. Like, the character design is really good. The level design is pretty darn good, and it like works well for what it is, which I think is very much a mobile game, although it is available on the Nintendo Switch. So right now it's on Apple Arcade and Nintendo Switch. I would say to me, it feels like a phone game. There are a ton of clones of Flappy Bird out there, so why would you pick this one? Most of them even have birds in them. We could do a whole Bird Week that was nothing but clones of Flappy Bird, and actually maybe that would be a fun thing to compare.
Flappy Bird Redux.
Yes, but this one has, whereas kind of Flappy Bird and a lot of Flappy Bird clones have this sort of infinite level, like high score run, this is very level based. The levels are designed to be replayed because a lot of times you have multiple routes through the levels, even though they're quite short. There's a lot of different things to interact with, from these like lizard enemies. There's quite a variety to them, to, other kinds of animals that are jumping around, to, different structures in the level. And all of it is in like this big overworld. There's like, I think 4 different overworlds, zones that you can go through. There's also a lot of effort put into making this something you could play on a long-term or ongoing basis. Like if this clicks for you, there's a lot of depth, not just a large number of levels, but there's a level designer, which I did kind of tinker around with a little bit, and it's actually pretty good. I when I see that kind of thing in a game, I'm usually not expecting to want to engage with it, but they seem to have learned a lot of the lessons of stuff like Mario Maker, because you have a lot of ability to tag levels and search for levels that are different kinds. One of the downsides to that level maker is you have to collect the different object and structures to put into the levels, and those are from blueprints that are scattered through all the mainline levels, so I didn't really have a lot of those when I was playing around with it. There's a lot of different ways to engage in this. Like, the different birds control differently. One of them's a parrot that is your typical flapper, but right away you get a baby penguin who can't really fly but can swim, and so the whole level design is pretty different there. There's other things. There's like a kingfisher that can dive into the water. There's a quail that can't fly but can kind of run along the ground and jump. So there's a lot of kind of variety there. But you also, in the nature of this being very customizable, like the levels, you also can customize the characters. So you can actually unlock like different color palettes for them and then create your own color palette. So you can decide, okay, I want to totally repaint this parrot. And you're free to do so. And there's actually a surprisingly good interface for doing that. So this seems like a game that like it wants you to really have fun with it in different ways and get into it. I don't know how, like, to what extent the level design community is going to take off for this, but there is a lot that you could do with these, and they do show a lot of that in the real levels. And the baby penguin really, really reminded me of something that I've been enjoying this week. So I don't know if we're doing a Making Us Happy this week, but one of the things that's been making me happy this week is I have been on a George Miller movie binge. Those who might be in the know that George Miller is one of them. Well, I should call out the podcast that has me doing this. That's Blank Check with Griffin and David, my favorite movies podcast, who's doing a filmography of George Miller. Basically, this is me working my way back to a rewatch of Mad Max Fury Road, which absolutely rules. But George Miller has had a weird career, and part of that weird career is making both Happy Feet movies. And
what a career.
For those of you who, like, literally Happy Feet 2 is the movie that gave George Miller the cash and the go-ahead to make Mad Max Fury Road.
Which, bless it.
Bless that presumably successful penguin movie.
Don't watch Mad Max Fury Road with your children. But if you have a kid, like I do, Happy Feet, especially Happy Feet 2, not that bad. Especially when you get to the absolute banger sequence that is when they do Under Pressure in Happy Feet 2, where they have all the walruses trying to shift this big piece of ice, and they're trying to like bash it, and the walruses are doing like a big ice bashing dance. And all the penguins are tapping along, and then from underneath the ice, the krill are tap dancing on the ice. They're all trying to shake this ice, and they do, guys, not to spoil it for you. Spoiler alert. So that's a great scene. So I hope you all have a chance to enjoy both this wonderful Tap to Flap and the works of George Miller.
I feel like I either saw Happy Feet in theaters, but why? Why would I have seen Happy Feet in theaters?
I saw Happy Feet in theaters, but that was because I was a child.
Right, but I wasn't.
I saw
was
that.
I babysitting? Maybe I took someone up babysitting.
I saw it, and I remember for Christmas that year, my brother got me a little Mumble stuffed animal.
Aww.
Oh.
That sounds
Do you remember how out of left field the last minute ecological message in that film was?
I'm going to be honest, I was like 10. I do not remember.
What, you weren't critiquing film at that point? Okay.
Shane, I appreciate you bringing that to us. And also, I'm glad that you let us know more about Fledgling Heroes. I didn't realize, so I was tracking Fledgling Heroes as a hot incoming bird game for Bird Week, but at the time I only knew that it was coming to Switch. The fact that it's on Apple Arcade was a total surprise to me, and if I had known it was going to be on Apple Arcade, I probably would have been even more excited and would have probably played it day one. As is, I haven't even downloaded it yet. But if you have an Apple Arcade subscription, this is on all of those devices and also on the Switch, which is pretty cool.
All right, time for the last bird fact.
Fact me.
Yes.
Closing out, relevant for this final game, in the bird world, you can find king penguins, king vultures, king eiders, 89 species of kingfishers, 11 species of kingbirds, and 3 species of tiny little kinglets. But of the 10,000 plus species of birds around the globe, there are no birds that are queens. There used to be a species of bird of paradise named the Queen Corolla's paratetia, but this bird has been, the name was trimmed just to Corolla's Paratetia more recently. So there are no birds with queen in the name.
Are there any with princess?
You know, that I do not know.
Get it together, Mark. You don't know the names of every.
Who is responsible for trimming the names of birds? And why would they do this?
You know, I don't know that part either.
These are all really interesting questions, and you're going to have to get back to us on the next Bird Week, Mark.
I sure am. That's why we need to have another Bird Week.
Yeah.
They need to keep happening.
Well, based on the time scale between the Bird Weeks, I think they're accelerating. We're only going, eventually every week will be Bird Week, and then we'll have multiple Bird Weeks per week, and it's going to be madness.
It's going to be a spin-off podcast by that point.
Absolutely.
And apologies, everybody, for the lack of puns in this episode.
Yeah, we've been a little...
Shane came out with a bang, and yet we have not told a single one since.
I blame COVID-19.
Oh, yay. Back on. That's the kind of content our listeners are looking for.
Yep. So thank you so much for that especially relevant note, Mark, because the next game I wanted to talk about was Revenge of the Bird King. And this is a weird one to talk about. I feel like I have to set up some of the stuff around this game before I tell you about the game itself, even though things about the game and its actual gameplay are quite interesting. Revenge of the Bird King is a game that I literally only played because on the Switch eShop, it was on sale for 1 cent. Let me tell you, it was worth that 1 cent, and I am very glad that I picked it up. But first of all, I want to explain some things about Revenge of the Bird King that I found while doing research about it that made it even more interesting, because I think this game has a bit of, to me, it felt like it had mystery surrounding it. It was like, what is this weird thing? Because its icon, its art is basically like a bird-headed man with a gun fighting a gorilla and some other animals in the background.
That sounds sick.
It looked pretty sick. The developer is M7 Games, who I had to look up, and they have only developed, this is the third game in a series. This is the third game in a game series called the Gun World series. And the Gun World series is a series of retro-styled 2D platformers that seem to be the closest thing to outsider art that I have seen in the gaming landscape, at least on consoles. It's a very strange series. They all seem very, very similar, except for perhaps their plot and like level design. They're all the same art style, which I can absolutely say is not attractive. They're set all on a planet called Gun World. Which is a planet where guns grow from plants. In fact, let me read you the opening crawl for Revenge of the Bird King, the third Gun World game. It all started with a bang. A thunderous crack echoed into a vast nothingness. Like a divine gunfire, it shot life, stars, and worlds throughout the cosmos. One of those planets was Gun World, a land of bravado, heroes, and legends. On Gun World, none are more revered than the gunmen and gunwomen, legendary heroes who dedicate their lives to harvesting gun plants. So, okay, it had me there, right? And then it kind of undercuts itself. This is going to be kind of a theme with this game, is that it has really good ideas and then tends to sort of undercut them. The next thing that it says in the opening crawl is, yeah, on Gun World, guns grow on trees. Just go with it, okay? Anyway, and then the crawl continues. And I imagine that thinks it's being cute, but it undercuts its own humor very consistently. Every time it does something that is actually funny, it tries to do this like, hey, wink, nod, did you notice our joke? Do you get that we're joking thing? And it's like, yes, I got that you were joking and you just spoiled it. Thanks. So it has a style of humor going for it that I don't think always works. But the game does have some things about it that are very amusing. It is about the main character is President Eagle of the gun world, and he's trying to get revenge for the plot is very confusing. There's a team of evil animal creatures from other planets that received a book in the mail that told them that they needed to come to Gun World, and then apparently they're enemies of the bird, President Eagle. The Bird King is long dead, apparently, and we're like hunting down his relics or something. I haven't played long enough to really understand the plot, and I'm not sure that it's actually something you can or need to understand. But it has a lot of it. It has a lot of plot. But it's actually weirdly compelling to play. It's like it's broken in many weird ways that make it kind of bad, but also really compelling. It's hard to explain. So okay, I want to talk about its platforming mechanics. It really feels like a game that was created by one person who is really passionate about like recreating and combining the things that they loved about the games from their childhood. So it has RPG style progression. It has an overworld plus side-scrolling elements that feels a lot sort of like ripped from Zelda 2. It has platforming that feels a bit like it's designed to replicate the sort of run and shoot aspects of something like Mega Man. It's very, very hard. It has incredibly punishing, weird saving and reloading mechanic, where first of all you have to remember to save manually, which feels like a bit out of place in a game like this today. And when you die, you go back to the beginning of the level unless you have paid 2,000 coins, which are very hard to get together, to buy a respawn eagle that lets you respawn in place. So it's very expensive so it's like really, really hard to get through one of these levels. And the level design is really, the difficulty is all backloaded. So you have to get all the way just to the boss and then die, and you have to start the whole thing over. Very NES hard, legitimately a very hard game. But it does some things that are really kind of interesting. It has, you don't start each level with a gun, but you start each level with an unlimited number of gun seeds. So you can throw the gun seeds onto the ground and instantly a gun plant grows, which is a little plant that has a massive revolver coming out of it. And you pick up the revolver, which is at least as big as President Eagle himself. And then you can start shooting it, and eventually it runs out of ammo and you have to plant another gun seed. Or you can use your gun seeds to plant a turret that shoots for you. So there's a lot of kind of trying to angle to be able to throw a gun seed into a place to kill an enemy to like clear out a platform so that it's safe for you to jump onto, that kind of thing. You also have a massive sword, but your massive sword isn't for hitting things or isn't for killing things. It's only for like hitting armor off of things. So you might have to like go in with your massive sword, hit something to knock its armor off, and then maybe toss a gun seed to plant a turret and get that to shoot it from behind or something like that.
Classic Bird gameplay.
Classic Bird gameplay. And it's really broken and also really compelling. And I don't know how else to describe it.
How would you rank the birds?
Well, President Eagle himself has rockin' abs. And so I'd say he's one of the most powerful birds in the entire animal kingdom.
Quick question about, you mentioned the respawn mechanic being a respawn eagle.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. You have to buy the respawn eagles from the sassy vending machine.
I mean, is that something that has an in-world meaning?
No.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
If you are designing a game and you want to have a bird that brings people back to life, may I recommend the mythical phoenix?
Yes,
you may. That's a good call. But here, the respawn eagle is something that you buy out of the sassy vending machine, and you have to buy them in advance. And then you go to you make your way across the Zelda style level, and you find one of the. Every level seems to be open to you from the beginning, so you can't really. You have to kind of trial and error your way into figuring out which one to go to next. And then once you figured out a level to go to, you bash your brains against it. If you're me, you bash your brains against it endlessly until I've only beaten one boss in this so far, apart from the intro level that also I think had a boss. So I'm not honestly all that far into it. I have to say, of the games that I played for this week, the best one is probably Duck Souls. But the one that I am compelled to play because I don't get it, it's weird, is this game. It's a weird game, and I find it very compelling. I do also want to mention a couple of other things about it that I thought were sort of interesting. It doesn't wear this on its sleeve, but it's developed by one of the guys who works for limited run games. there's this sort of weird aspect to it where Limited Run Games is the publisher. If you look at it like on the Switch eShop, they published the game. And there have been physical editions of this game. There's actually some like controversy around that because there is a physical version of this game that was produced but never sold, not an official Limited Run Games release. What seems to have happened was that the guy works for Limited Run Games, so he knows how to get a physical copy of a game produced, but never sold it apart from direct sales to presumably his friends or something like that. And that makes it, this is the PS4 version. I don't think there's been a physical copy of the Switch version. So presumably this is the rarest game ever on the PlayStation 4 because it's not available for download on the PlayStation 4. It is on the Switch. You can't download this game on the PS4, and you could only get an official like a copy of this game on a disc directly from the guy. So this may potentially be the rarest physical PlayStation 4 game, which makes it interesting from a collector's standpoint. But I don't know, just a weird damn thing. If anybody has knows how, like, I don't know what to do next in this game right now. So I really want to play more of it because I find it weirdly compelling. If anybody can tell me how to get good at Revenge of the Bird King, please reach out, because right now I'm finding this game like bizarrely frustrating, compelling, and weird. I need help getting this out of my brain. Thank you. That's all I have to say about Revenge of the Bird King.
Just tap to flap.
Yes. So now that I've slightly gotten that out of my system, thank you so much for listening to The Short Game. This has been our Bird Week episode for 2020. And who knows when the next Bird Week will be? Hopefully it will be soon. It will happen the next time that we have enough bird games to talk about. So listeners, if you know of a good game that features birds prominently, ideally ones in which you play as a bird, but not necessarily, just whatever you think
Go
of
on
as bird
IFDB and
games.
tag them bird protagonists.
Yes, please do that.
Yes.
And then also get in touch with us, because we are always collecting these games to do another Bird Week. We had toyed briefly with the idea of doing a Crab Week, but we had a hard time getting together enough games. It seems like birds are just the thing. There's enough bird games. We haven't come up with anything else. So Bird Week forever, baby. If you like the show, you can support us by going to patreon.com/theshortgame, where you can, for as little as $1 a month, you can support the show. We'll get our immense thanks. And also you'll become a member of our Discord community, where we talk mostly about bird games. And occasionally we also talk about other video games too.
And if you are enjoying all the bird content and you would like some more, I just launched a new series over at BirdNote.
It's so good, guys.
The second season of Sound Escapes with host Gordon Hempton, the sound tracker. Each episode is a beautiful, rich soundscape taking you to different places around the planet, where you'll get a little bit of context and story from Gordon about where he recorded these and why these are important places to be hearing in this particular moment, where many of us are sheltering in place and really cooped up inside. Then these are hopefully ways to really broaden the world kind of that we are living in. And it's been fun to make, and I'm really excited to have that out where people can finally listen to it. And yeah, you should go check that out. It is Sound Escapes. If you search for that, BirdNote presents Sound Escapes on your podcast app, then you'll find it, or birdnote.org/sound escapes.
That's so great. I am definitely going to have a link to that in the show notes if anybody is interested in listening to that. I can definitely imagine that being a good vibe for right now.
It's so comforting. It's great.
It's perfect to put on while you're working, just to relax a little to that, or to even just sit around and listen to it. They are very pretty.
So you can also, of course, find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net, where you'll find our contact form. That's a great way to let us know about the bird games that you are playing. And of course, you can also find us on your podcast app of choice, and we always appreciate ratings, reviews, and all of those things. Tell a friend, do all of the things to let them know about this bird podcast that occasionally covers other types of games as well. So, Laura, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
And Mark, where can people find you and all of your work on the internet? Sound Escapes, of course, a very big one, but what should people search for?
You can find me on Twitter at MC Bramhill, and you can find some of the things that I've made over the years at markbramhill.com.
And Shane, where can people find you?
You can find me also on Twitter at 8BitShane.
And I'm Reagan Kelly, of course, and you can find me on Twitter at ReaganK. And thank you so much for listening to Bird Week.
Caw-caw!
Caw.